Well, good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody's had a good weekend so far. Hope you've had a better weekend than I have. I've spent the last Friday evening and Saturday literally suffering from some kind of food poisoning, something I ate. So, starting to feel a little better now, but this may be I think this is our second liquored up and sober, actually. And I've got a guest, and I'm kind of glad I'm sober for this one in particular because this is another human being who knows what ludology means. And we're going to get into that. We're going to get into a lot of things, but I'm actually super pumped for this conversation. So I'm going to let him introduce himself. Then I will introduce myself, and we'll just go from there. So, you know him, you love him. His name is Moses, also known as the Well-Read Mage. And go ahead and tell them a little bit about yourself. Pretend like they don't know who you are.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? And thanks for the invite too, Zoo. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah,
Friggin' Mage takeover, Dan said in chat. I'm gonna be eyeballing chat because
me
there's some
too.
nerds
Yeah.
there.
Oh yeah, yeah. We read.
but
And by the way, we read everybody's chat. So
oh
welcome in,
yeah,
man.
so I know what you nonsense folk are saying out there. No, hey, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. It's been a long time coming, hadn't it? Because you invited me some months back, and I kept saying, I've got a major project coming out, couple major projects really. And so I wanted to make sure I started doing podcast rounds when that was going. But anyway, name's Moses Norton. I'm an author, editor, writer, streamer, podcaster, architect, engineer, astronaut, cowboy, just on down the list. And it's good to be here. I love talking about video games and the craft of criticism. I love talking about them as works of art. Not that all of them are masterpieces, but that's okay. It's part of the joy of discussing games. So I kind of got that vibe from you. You mentioned ludology. It should be fun. I'm a pseudo intellectual, so I can BS myself through any conversation. So even if I don't know what you're talking about, Zoo, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Well, that's part of the fun of having these kind of long form, live off the cuff discussions. Is kind of figuring things out, piecing things together, and I think we're going to have ourselves a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and just take a quick peek at the chat before we get going, and then I guess I'll start with how we kind of met because I think there's a fun story there. So Phantom Cat Punch says, "Woo! Hello, everyone. What's going on, Phantom? How's it going? Thanks for coming in, man. I'm glad I actually was able to shuffle out of bed to get here, man. It's been a struggle today, but I had to do this one for sure." Dan says, "Mage over,
Mage over.
mage
Okay.
over." Yeah, well, we're definitely getting a mage over here today here on Liquored Up Live, so I think it's going to be good.
There you go.
Displaced Appellation says, "I Mage, love your name, by the way. That's cool as fuck." Um,
It is a cool name.
he says, first question. Okay, we'll just get rolling here. First question: what is the worst RPG decision Capcom ever made, and why was it Breath of Fire 5? Okay, so it's a
So
great
anyway,
game, just not a great Breath of Fire game. And I'm gonna have to defer to Mage on this one because I was not present for that entire era of gaming, actually. So
oh yeah. So here's the lowdown. It's not Breath of Fire 5, not the worst RPG
okay,
decision Capcom has ever made. The worst RPG Capcom decision Capcom has ever made was Breath of Fire 6.
okay,
Okay, if you did not know that there's a Breath of Fire 6,
nope,
that's
I
part
didn't.
of why Capcom made such a bad decision. It was like a Japan only game that was like canceled. And so you can't even actually play Breath of Fire 6.
Oh
So
shit.
yeah,
Okay.
a lot of people
All
think
right.
that Breath of Fire 5 ended the franchise. And no, it was Breath of Fire 6 technically.
So do
They
we
could
know?
have bounced back from 5, really. I mean, they could have been like, "Oh, we'll go back to tradition, the things that fans love." And put it out. But no, instead they made a Japan exclusive that looked like a mobile game. So, fun
I was
times.
gonna say, is that the story behind that? It was just a really kind of shitty product that wasn't up to series
I
standards.
guess
And
I
well, because here's the
yeah.
thing, and I deal with this. This is kind of the thing that if you follow me on Twitter at all, guys, I beat this drum so fucking hard, and that is the fact that when you are dealing with an established franchise, an established IP, you're dealing not just it's kind of death of the author, right? So it's not yours anymore. It belongs to the fans once you put something out there. And so you can't have your cake and eat it too. Sometimes you can, but for the most part, the fans expect in a certain IP, in a certain franchise, a certain standard, and they expect certain gameplay tropes and identity. that oftentimes developers, because they want to wallow in creativity, sometimes at the expense of what their fans expect, their fans' expectations, works out
Mm,
sometimes, but a lot of
yeah.
times it doesn't.
Yeah, you know what I think is dangerous is the temptation to subvert expectations. I've come
Yes.
to really not like the term subverting expectations because it almost seems like the developers or filmmakers or the creatives value being clever and saying, "Ha, gotcha," more than actually creating something that people who already love the brand will enjoy. So I think it's one thing to appeal to longtime fans, another thing to bring in new fans. I think you can do both, but then it's a whole other carnival to put it lightly, to subvert expectations on purpose and just like, what is the reaction that you want? Look at how clever we are. We subverted your expectations. And sometimes that feels good. You know, you're surprised. Sometimes it just feels mean spirited.
Well, until they get their sales numbers, it feels good.
Yeah.
Yeah, till the Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword checks their fucking sales, then it don't feel too good, huh?
Yowza.
Until Metroid Other M checks their sales, all of a sudden doesn't feel too good, huh? Feel a little sick,
Yeah.
like I'm
Oh,
feeling today, huh?
Dan said it perfect right here. I like being surprised. I don't like being tricked. There's two different things. I
Dan,
love
I'm
that.
gonna steal that, buddy. That's
That's
amazing. I
good.
like being
Yeah.
surprised. I don't like being tricked. So we'll go ahead and highlight that ahead of time for sure. That's a good one. Now Dan also said that he just called himself a space cowboy. Yeah, he's right after the old Richard Garriott tradition, is what I would say.
Yeah.
Richard Garriott is like trying to be the most the real life Dos Equis guy. And if you ever met Richard, he succeeds, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I've chatted with him, but I've
No,
never
Garriott,
spoken
yeah,
to
no,
him in
Richard
person.
Garriott is an amazing human, and made one of my favorite video game series of all time. Fucking Ultima, man.
Yeah.
Ultima was
That's
just a
classic.
nuclear bomb on the video game landscape. Just absolutely just changed everything, and
Yeah.
literally made that game because he used to be a dungeon master. He used to do the tabletop games. He's like, I bet we can put this to Pixel, and
And
he went
turns
out
out
and he fucking did it.
you can.
So
Yep.
absolutely. So I guess I would start by saying I always like to tell the story on kind of how the origin story is, how we ended up chatting together here. So you were on your quest to play every Super Nintendo game on real hardware. And that's something
Yeah.
I couldn't always chat with you because a lot of times you're streaming while I'm at work, but I would always tune into those. And one of the ones you decided you were going to play, and I just kind of threw out there jokingly because I'm like, no fucking way this fucking guy is going to play Ominous. There's no fucking way. So I said, well, that means you got to play Ominous. So you're doomed before you start. So have fun starving to death before you even get out of the fucking castle. And you're like, no, hey, you're on. I said, okay, you're really going to do this, huh? So if you do this, I'll send you something nice. Well,
And it was really nice too. It wasn't just like, I'll send you like a sticker or like a card or something. It was really nice.
I had a Kirby plushie, right?
Yes, it was a like a lap heater that's
Nice.
shaped like Kirby that that is amazing. Like, I mean, Kirby's like the cutest thing, but yeah, he heats up. It warms your lap. It's
Well,
great.
you fucking earned it, buddy, playing through that game. Is it so? So here's the thing, though. So because I once put that in one of my articles for the top 10 worst SNES games of all time, up there with like
Yeah.
Race Driven and Wayne's World and fucking
Mm.
Pit Fighter. Oh, bad game. Did you ever run across any games that were worse than Ominous so far, or is it
Um
still the worst?
okay,
Is Lord of
so
the Rings worse?
ooh, yeah. So I was playing through every Super Nintendo RPG, right?
Hmm.
Um which is nice because that kind of cuts out like Wayne's World and stuff like that. And like I don't have to
Oh
play Home Improvement, you know?
gosh.
I have played Home Improvement, but that's not a great game. And as good as the Super Nintendo could be, some of its bad stuff is really bad. So,
Yeah.
some of it will be like, you know, movie or TV tie-in stuff like Home Improvement, Wayne's World. Some of it will be ports from PC. And those ones are where the RPG scene is at its worst. So
Yeah.
I would say like the 3 worst that I've played, because I haven't finished playing through all of the Super Nintendo RPGs.
Hmm.
My list includes like 44 to 46 games, something like that.
Right.
But the top 3 worst are Obidus, The Lord of the Rings, which is like J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, Volume 1. It's like a super long name. And of course, they never made a direct sequel on the Super Nintendo.
Wonder how that. I wonder why
And
not.
yeah, I wonder why. And then Enindo Way of the Ninja, um, which is it's a stream killer. It's extremely dull to play and watch.
Ooh, okay.
So now here's the thing though, is I beat Obidus. I did not beat Enindo Way of the Ninja. I actually had to stop.
Oh
I
wow.
plan to finish it eventually, but it's a long game and it's hard to know where to go and what to do. Whereas Obidus, like I followed a guide and like with a guide, I had to reference a guide for Anindo, but with a guide for Obidus, I think we beat it in like a stream or two.
You didn't take
Um,
long. That's the thing. I'm like, holy shit! I should have fucking
it's
did
a
it with a
short
guide.
game. I mean, there's like 4 dungeons or something like that in Obidus. But the problem with Obidus,
You can
and it's a
starve. You can
you're right,
starve.
it's a port from PC to Super Nintendo. So there's a lot that is kind of lost in translation there. But it's a dungeon crawler with a stamina system. And it's a rough stamina. I mean, you could starve, you can run out of light. So like you just have to walk through the dark in these tunnels. It's a really, really brutal game. And I could not imagine playing through the whole thing without some kind of guide.
Keep in mind, this is back in the day where those games were anywhere from $60 to $80, too, guys. So
Yeah.
imagine going home with that. That's what I said in my review. Imagine going home with Obidus and never playing another RPG game again. Thanks, Obidus. Hope you
Yeah.
feel good
Yeah.
about yourself.
And you know what? I came around to thinking that it's not even an RPG. Like I wound up playing
You
through the
did
whole
say,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, but I came away thinking it's an action adventure. And the reason for that is there's really only a life bar and a stamina bar. There's no stats, and therefore there's no kind of crunching of numbers, which,
Right,
like
right. People always,
RPGs.
yes, people always ask me what
Yeah,
an RPG is. If you're not doing dice rolls and number crunching, if there's not some numbers
exactly.
going on in the background, not an RPG. It's why I will say all the time,
Yeah.
hey, in Oblivion,
Yeah, yeah.
Skyrim, not RPGs, guys.
Well, I,
Controversial.
I I've never
Morrowind
played those,
isn't. Yeah,
so
Morrowind
I
is an
can't.
RPG.
I've never played those, so I can't make a statement on that.
Yeah.
I don't want to get nasty emails, but
Oh, I I
but
I, I live
uh,
for them.
well, with Obidus, I went and I edited Wikipedia because Wikipedia had it wrong, and I
Okay.
included specific examples why I think it's an action adventure. There's no weapons or equipment. You can like pick up a rock or like a knife that you could throw,
Hmm.
but it's all item acquisition progression. There's nothing intrinsic. There's no character growth. There's no number. None of the things that we associate with traditional RPG
Yeah, more
systems.
akin to Terra Enigma or a Zelda than a
Yeah,
hardcore
yeah,
behind the
more
scenes
akin to
number
Zelda
crunching
for sure.
RPG. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
no, I hear that for sure. What I will say about this is like I think so. You've actually played the fucking game. You've actually beat the fucking game. Whereas most people,
Obidus, yeah.
I don't think most people have. So I think we would anybody who wants to dispute your Wikipedia entry, yeah, show proof that you've actually beat it because no, you haven't. You goddamn liar.
Yeah.
No, you
Now,
haven't.
did you beat it, Zoo?
No,
Okay. I
no,
still think I've not met anybody else who has beaten the game.
no. I
Um,
played it for my review.
okay. I
And
met a couple people who knew what it was, but I don't think I don't think I've meeten. I don't think I've met anybody yet who's beaten it. I think
well,
they're
they're
out there.
they're better off. They're better off.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they save themselves some time.
so Well Red Mage says astronaut cowboy. Did I stutter? You did not. Stutter.
That's me.
Um,
I'm sneaking into your chat.
that's fine.
On the face.
Then he got Phantom Cat Punch says ha 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 true. And then yeah, Displaced Appellation says fair, fair. Phantom Cat Punch says it was like Maple Story combined with Breath of Fire. Ew.
Oh yeah, that was Breath of Fire
Yeah,
6. Yeah.
ew. Dragon Quarter has its fans, Dan Caparello says.
Yeah,
And
I
you said,
have to agree. I've
yeah,
met some.
you said for sure early roguish thing seems like. And then he says, I like being surprised. I don't like being tricked. We'll leave that up for a second because that's that is a very good. That's good. And I think like one of the ways that Nintendo can fuck up too, but Nintendo actually surprisingly gets that right a lot. Where
Mhm.
they'll throw in a surprise element, but you leave not feeling tricked, with a couple of exceptions. I felt tricked the first time I played a 3D Mario. I felt tricked because I never got my 2D Mario for 18 fucking years. Um,
Oh man, was it that long?
it was 18 years that we went
Wow.
without a 2D Mario on home console. It was
Wow.
18 years. I kept track. I kept fucking track. I was so mad. And then Metroid Other Rim, and then Zelda Skyward Sword, I think is where more people. A lot of people say Wind Waker, but and I have problems with Wind Waker. Not my favorite
Uh-huh.
game, but
Right.
I don't think that Wind Waker was quite the bait and switch that we're talking about here. I think that was Skyward
No.
Sword.
Well, with Wind Waker, a lot of the controversy was the art style, right? And that's going to come across in marketing,
Well,
you
and
know?
and and I don't believe that, Mage. And let me tell
Yeah.
you, I don't believe it when they say that. I think what was happening there, because look at 20 years later, and we feel like the art style is like one of the best aged parts of that game at this point.
Oh yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
I think what's happening is, like, when you're sick and you don't know why you're sick, but you just know you're sick. You know something's wrong. That's kind of what was going on with Wind Waker and the outcry. So the art style was the most visible thing, and that's
Uh-huh.
the thing that people attacked. Is my theory on that. I think what people actually didn't like is that Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker was continuing the Eiji Aonuma can't beat the Octo Rocks direction of turning Zelda into a PC point and click adventure game. I think
Ah,
he was
interesting.
continuing that, where it culminated, of course, in Skyward Sword. And I think that's what fans were actually mad about, but I don't think they knew how to vocalize it properly.
That's sensible. I checked out around that period of time in
Hmm.
gaming. I was in college, really
Same
busy
here.
with studies, and but I remember being disinterested in games post 2000,
Hmm.
throughout the aughts. It's because everything kind of went gray. Everything went real monotone. There were a
Oh
lot of
God, yeah,
shooters.
the era of Brown.
Right, right, right. Every single cover seemed like it was like a guy with his back to the viewer holding two weapons looking over his shoulder. You know what I mean? Like it
Yes.
was like
Yeah.
every single thing, the chin down, eyes up type thing. And I it just wasn't appealing to me. Like was still playing I think I was still playing like my PS2 and Super Nintendo to death in the early aughts.
Well, and here's what happened. Here's what happened. At least from what I can view, because I basically took after the Super Nintendo. Like, we had a N64 in the house. Didn't That
Mhm,
was where I started really checking out, was the N64, right?
mhm,
And then the GameCube did not interest me at all. Still really doesn't. So I came back in with the Nintendo Wii. That's the system I came back in with because that was a system that had Wii Sports. And then what really finally grabbed me and solidified it was New Super Mario Brothers Wii. Prior
oh,
prior to that, though, so what's so interesting about the Wii proposition to gaming is they showed up and they said, "Hey, gaming isn't really growing. Gaming is only riding the macroeconomic trends forward. What happens when those macroeconomic trends reverse? Well, then we come to the dilemma. Meanwhile, gaming tech keeps getting more and more expensive. Graphics keeps getting more and more expensive. Keeps processing gets more and more expensive to develop for, and the revenue is going to start shrinking once those macroeconomics go into reverse. So we need to correct course. I want to send this in the heart of the gamer speech. We need to start making games for gamers and not just games for ourselves. We need to start getting costs under control. And so we
mhm,
present to you the revolution, the Wii proposition. You can see the industry's response in the shit colored brown, gray, yellow games that are all super duper processing speeds throughout the entire 360 PlayStation 3 era. You can see the response. They rejected Nintendo's proposition. And the end result is what happened, huh? You had THQ drawn and quartered. You had over 280 development studios lost their jobs, were closed in that time period because guess what happened? Nintendo literally made that speech in 2004. In 2008, we had the Great Recession, and the macroeconomic trends went in reverse, and gaming took a heck of a tumble, didn't it? So I just want to point out that if that I can only imagine what video games would look like today had the games industry, in particular the Western games industry, but the Japanese studios as well. I can only imagine what gaming might look like today had the Wii proposition been embraced rather than met with hostility.
That's interesting. I think there's a lot there. I think at a superficial level, like later, both PlayStation and Xbox were like, wait a minute, people must really like motion controls.
Yeah,
So
that
let's
wasn't even.
make our own little, doohickeys, and we'll call it like, what was it? PlayStation Move and Xbox Connect.
Yeah, there was a great article a long time ago. God, let me see if it's Birdman and the Casual Fallacy.
Yeah, while you look that up, I'll draw
Oh,
that
I can't. I
point.
can't look it up. It's gone. Like he scrubbed
Oh,
it.
okay.
The author scrubbed it. That's
Well,
why I've
the
got
the
it.
point the point was only that I think they were misunderstanding why people were migrating to the Wii.
Mhm.
Yeah, they were just like, oh, they just like the gimmick of the motion controls. When like I got back into gaming because of the Wii, but it wasn't because of the motion controls. It was largely because there were games on that system that reminded me of the fun that I had with video games
Yes,
as a
100%.
kid. Yeah.
100%. It was a return to formula. Look at it. You've
Yeah.
got you got the
That's what
first
it
2D
felt like.
Mario game in 18 years. You've got Zelda Twilight Princess. Well, I don't care for it. It was seen by a lot of people as a return to a more classical Zelda direction. You've got Punch Out. You've got Donkey Kong Country Returns. You've got big RPGs like Xenoblade Chronicles that showed up thanks to
That
Operation
was the
Rainfall.
first time I played Monster Hunter was
Monster Hunter
on
Try.
was
Yeah.
on Try, yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember going into a game store and I just had got a Wii, and I asked the clerk if he could recommend a long RPG for the system, and he was like, you got to play Monster Hunter Try. And
Yeah.
wow, I loved it. It
Mhm.
was such an excellent game.
So, meanwhile, in gray AAA video game land, um, they're all going under. And by the way, it wasn't like the Wii was immune from that. Like the moment the 2008 crisis started, their sales started slipping too. And it
Sure,
was all, but
sure.
but here's the amazing thing, and this is a story I love to tell. So in 2008, we're in full recession at that point, and gaming starts to reverse, just like Iwata said they were. In 2009, Nintendo, still at the height of that recession, Nintendo releases a game called New Super Mario Brothers Wii. Immediately starts selling out Nintendo Wii's again with the 2D Mario game. The game went on to sell 30 million copies, damn near.
Wow.
Like, and
Yeah,
keep it
Mario is a juggernaut of sales.
2D Mario, yeah. Now, one can argue that 3D Mario finally kind of got its game like that with Mario Odyssey. Because I think Mario Odyssey
Interesting.
has done 27 million, that is not even close. That's the best selling 3D Mario game ever. It even shatters the macroeconomic things like population increase, which that would always be my argument. People are like, well, um, no, 3D Mario is okay because Mario 64 sold 10 million, and then Mario Galaxy also sold 2 million. I'm like, yeah, when did Mario 64 come out, guy? And he's like, oh, well, yeah, 1997. Okay. When did Super Mario Galaxy come out? Oh, 2009? Yeah, that's a lot of population growth in between those two games, isn't it? So 10 million,
Mhm.
10 years later, that's a decline. That's not growth. That's a decline because there's more people. And also the Wii sold literally double what the N64 sold. That game should have doubled what Mario 64 sold, and it didn't because people just were not interested in 2D Mario at that time. They just weren't. And then New Super Mario Brothers Wii comes up and just shows that off completely. So there's a lot of interesting stories from that era, a lot of lessons. I think the games industry took some of them properly.
Mhm.
I think they're still yet to learn some of what the Wii taught us.
Yeah. Now it looks like Dan's got a clarification in
Mhm.
here. New Super Mario Bros for DS was the first 2D Mario since SNES, not Wii.
On
So was it?
technically, so it was the first 2D Mario since Super Mario World on the handheld systems. I'm talking about the
Oh,
console
okay.
game. So
Console
yeah,
is your
it took him
clarification.
18 years, Dan, in order to get me my Mario 64 was the best-selling game of the fifth generation. Okay,
For N64 or for
it.
across the
I was gonna
board?
say
Did
I would be.
did
I'm
Mario
not gonna say you're
64
wrong.
outsell Final Fantasy 7? Because I
No,
would be
no.
very
Actually,
curious.
no, it didn't because Final Fantasy VII sold around 14 million. So actually, no, it didn't. Number one. Number two. Yeah, 10 million. And how many N64 sold then? How many N64s would have sold if they would have
Yeah,
had a
I
2D
don't know
Mario?
this information off the top of my head.
I don't think that's true, but we're gonna check that real quick. But let's go ahead and we have a contention. So
I
final.
think that also too there's some acknowledgement that needs to take place in terms of how difficult it can be to find uh sales units sold information
Well, there's a great
from
reference
the
for that.
time
It's
period.
vgsalesfandom.com, and they even quote through sources. So the Final Fantasy VII series, which we don't give a shit about, that's the whole series. I don't care about that.
Yeah, that compilation.
We don't give a shit about that. We want Final Fantasy VII series. So Final Fantasy VII remake. Give me a second here. Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation 1.
Were you like at VG charts?
VGsales.fandom.wiki is
Okay,
kind of the good
VG.
one.
This is not my
So
usual
yeah,
realm
no.
of
So Final
research.
Fantasy, yeah. So altogether, Final Fantasy VII original on PlayStation 1 and PC sold 14 million on the original game discs. So very few of those come from PC. Most are going to come from the International Edition and the Final Fantasy VII. So that's yep. So yeah, altogether 14.4 million altogether for Final Fantasy VII. Now let's look at Mario 64, which I believe was around 10 million, but there could be an update too. So Mario series sales.
Oh, that's like Jim Ryan the other day. It might have been this morning.
Oh,
He was
Jim
like,
Ryan,
"Hey, I know you."
Lion ass Jim Ryan, which we'll definitely get to.
He's like, "Hey, by the way, we actually sold an extra 5 million PS2s. I just now remembered that for no reason."
Okay. So let's
Hilarious.
see. So okay, so on Super Mario Brothers sold 40 million copies. Let's see. Mario Brothers. So only Mario Odyssey equals the top echelon of Mario games. The only 3D Mario game that even close to that is going to be Super Mario Odyssey. Super Mario 64 is way down here. So update 11.6 million on Super Mario 64. Or no, wait, that's the DS. We want Mario
Does
64.
that include just the original release,
Well,
or
we
does
want to
that
look. Yeah,
include
what I'm looking
re-releases?
for is original hardware only because there's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
million
yeah.
re-releases of these games.
Right. They even put
So,
that out recently on
yep. So we're looking for specifically. So Super Mario 64 DS. Super Mario
I can't
64. Oh, there it is, 11.91 million. So nope, it didn't. Yeah, there's a
I'm just
reason.
along for the ride. I
Yeah,
can't find the website.
yeah. There's a reason why the PlayStation outperformed the Nintendo 64, and the lack of 2D Mario is one of the reasons for that, guys. I
Yeah, I mean a huge one that I always see contested and or attributed rather is shift in RPGs. I know that was huge for me coming from Super Nintendo into the fifth generation of consoles and kind of seeing how everything was shifting in terms of who was really getting more RPGs, what kind of RPGs were coming out. um I didn't play many RPGs on the N64. There aren't many RPGs on the
Hey,
N64.
there's
I've got a
always
list.
there's always Quest 64, right?
No, in the trash.
Um, well, let me give you one that apparently is really good, and that's Ogre Battle 64.
Yeah, no, that one would probably be my pick for most
Yeah,
competent
yeah. Ogre Battle
N64
was.
RPG.
I remember
You know,
playing that at a friend's house and being really impressed by that game.
yeah, you know what? Some lists include Gauntlet Legends. I liked that game quite
Okay,
a bit.
yeah.
Um, love that one. But yeah, if you were an RPG fan in 5th gen, you were probably on PS1.
Right.
Don't bring up Quest 64. Dan knows what's up.
Okay. Well, why don't we like Quest 64? What's wrong with Quest? What is wrong
I
with
can't,
Quest 64?
I can't get into it. Earlier, you asked me if there's anything I don't want to talk about on live
Okay.
podcasting,
Fair enough.
and that's it.
All right. Well, consider the matter closed, guys. We don't
It
talk
was
about
part of a
Quest
smear
64.
campaign. Let's just say that.
All
Yeah,
right. Well, we don't talk
we'll
about
leave it
Quest
there.
64. So, Phantom Cat Punch
Uh,
says, "I agree, Dan, about the. I don't. I love that statement. I don't like being surprised. I like being surprised. I don't like being tricked. Like fucking internalizing that. That's an amazing statement by Dan Caparillo. Um,
pronunciation.
you have it, bud. LOL. Yeah, Richard Garriott has ACI. Actually been to space. Yeah, fuck. I'm jealous. Well,
Gets to
yeah,
be Lord and an astronaut.
yeah. He's a lord and an astronaut. He's Lord British and an astronaut. Yeah, it still didn't stop him from being killed in his own game, though. Classic story. And then you said ASCII and then typo. So now I get to claim ignorance. What is ASCII?
Oh yeah, ASCII. That's so probably the closest thing to it now is, you remember on like Game Facts when you open up a fact and somebody redrew like the title screen of a game or the logo, but
Yeah.
with all letters, that's ASCII, right?
Oh, okay.
So when I was a kid, some of the earliest video games I remember playing were ASCII games on my dad's like freaking like ex-marine computer.
Holy
This thing
shit.
looked like it drove submarines. It had like a shade over the top of the screen, and it was like black and green only. And like the screen might have been like 8 inches across diagonally. Tiny, horrible ancient computer. But it had games where you could play as like the letter S moving across, ladders made out of the letter H, and platforms made out of the equals sign, and you could throw bombs that were zeros. And so it was just like this really early phase of video games
Okay.
where they were just using like letters for graphics. Um, that doesn't mean I'm super old. It just means my dad had really old stuff when I was young.
Well, if you remember the NES era, you're super old. That basically
Oh
like
no.
that's me too. And because keep in mind, like most games journos are what I like to call PlayStation babies, so that was kind of their first real video game awakening. And so anything before the PlayStation, because that's where their journalistic writings start. Anything before that is like some magical land of the lost. It's like some land
You know,
before time, man.
yeah, you know what? I
And it
once met
shows.
somebody on Twitter who told me that their first system was their mom's Wii. And I was
Hmm.
like, "Are you old enough to be on Twitter?" You're no, yeah, go no, because they said my mom's childhood Wii
My
is what they
mom's
said.
childhood.
And I
Fuck,
was
that was
like,
2005, 2006.
"What are you like 2 years old? How is this even possible?" It kind of blew my mind.
Yeah,
I was
that's
hoping it
wild,
was a
homie.
typo because, yeah, that was the one comment that really made me feel old. People will jokingly be like, "Oh, that made me feel old," and it was just like, "Hey, remember the TV show Dinosaurs?" Or "Hey, remember Transformers?" Or "Remember when Star Wars didn't suck?" And you're like, "Oh, I feel old. I feel old." But that one tweet really did make me feel
That did
like
you in there.
ancient. Yeah, I felt like the guy on The Last Crusade who drinks from the wrong grail, and just like instantly ages into a monster zombie.
Right.
Uh it was, yeah, it was bad. So
Um, and so he says numbers go up, making gamers happy as an RPG staple. And
yeah, there
you
you go.
said
Numbers.
true.
Yeah, numbers.
So
Numbers,
Dan
exactly.
Caparello says Wind Waker is my favorite Zelda. I'm sorry. And I've never heard anyone describe it as a point and click. What the fuck? Now, clarification there. I don't think Wind Waker was a point and click game. And I actually don't think it gets really, really bad until Skyward Sword. That was the point of no return. But go look at what E.G. Alnumas. You know what? I'll just quote him for you. Yeah, we don't like to make viewers do work here, not when I've already done the work. So bear with me, Dan, while I pull up my Zelda research document. I have that.
You have a Zelda research
I have a
document? Oh,
Zelda, yeah, for
who
just for
doesn't,
these
right? In
discussions, right?
today's
Yeah,
day and
absolutely.
age.
Yeah, you gotta have
Yeah, you got to be prepared. The one
So,
that I always run into is Zelda and RPG. I have a research document for that, so we're
so
good.
on Zelda's original job and concept, okay, exploring and interacting with an open world. That's the original concept. Getting stronger and more adept at operating within the rules of that world, and that this progression matters. Draws from dark fantasy and mythology, things like Lord of the Rings, Sleeping Beauty, Labyrinth, The Golden Fleece. That the Zelda franchise proves that creators often fail to understand why their work becomes popular in the first place. Example would be J.K. Rowling leaving Harry Potter to write murder mystery novels, which bombed. Turns out it was not her writing, but the world and its rules that people ended up flocking to. For an example, Harold Bloom, in his critique of Harry Potter, said, "I went to Yale University bookstore and I bought and read a copy of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I suffered a great deal in the process," he said. "The writing was dreadful. The book was terrible. As I read, I noticed that every time a character went for a walk, the author wrote instead that the character stretched his legs. I began marking the back of an envelope every time that phrase was repeated. I stopped only after I had marked up the entire envelope on both sides." So, five, that the further games stray away from this concept, the less people will be interested in the Zelda series. Anuma turned Zelda series into an adventure game series, which essentially almost destroyed the franchise. Zelda is an open world game, always has been. You start at the beginning and you go in any direction you want. The game was
Thank you.
inspired by Miyamoto exploring the forests and caves of his youth. Originally, the game was just dungeons. After playing Ultima 3 and Dragon Quest, they added the overworld. Zelda was open, and you could see these dungeons and explore this world out of order. It emphasized player choice rather than making you guess what the developer wanted you to do. Zelda 2 continued this tradition by offering a larger and more dangerous world with a Japanese take on Sleeping Beauty. Zelda 2 does do one thing differently from every other Zelda game that no one mentions: scaling. Zelda 2 does not scale while the other Zelda games do. Now, for people in the audience, scaling means that everything is on the overworld except dungeons and caves. Non-scaling means, like, for example, in Zelda 2, when Link walks in over to a town, you get to a new scale. So you enter the town and the town blows up, basically. When Link gets hit by a monster, etc. So Link was hampered. So Zelda 2 was hampered by a cartridge shortage, by the way, that resulted in low stock and the game being sold when found at over $100 in some places. So that's almost as much as the NES itself was, and still sold over 4 million copies. And source, there's a Chicago Tribune old school article I can link in the chat. With the original Zelda, you don't know who you are, what you're supposed to do. In this new game, as you interact with the nature and the world around you, you learn who you are. Not because anyone tells you, but because actions define you and your story. Not all the tutorials that would come to plague the later Enuma games. In the original Nintendo Fun Club newsletter, Legend of Zelda was trumpeted to the world as a hybrid game, as a best of both worlds. The first world was the world of the PC RPG. The game would be vast, large, much exploring, where you would be able to accumulate more upgrades and better weapons. The second was the world of the arcade, where combat would be fast paced, not turn based. The exploration part is good. The nasty enemies that test you, the dungeons, the caves, and such, where you get treasure, and where you emerge stronger than before and can do more than before. I once was afraid, now I am not. By more, I do not mean puzzles. I mean a boomerang in order to help kill shit. I mean a better sword, better armor, more health, etc. So, let me take a deep breath. And what do you think? What do you think about that, Mage?
Oh man, I don't know. That was a lot of information. Zelda is so I'm gonna take it back to my usual touching point since I study RPGs so much.
Uh huh.
Um, Zelda is a weird series for people who attempt to classify and categorize things. Some of that is Miyamoto's. statements, you know? So like he's stated in numerous different places that he thinks Zelda is an RPG. He thinks Zelda is not an RPG. He thinks Zelda is an RPG if you want it to be, or he thinks it's like an RPG.
So now remember what I said about creators often don't know why their game is popular.
Right.
Miyamoto and Zelda
Also,
absolutely fits that fucking bill.
yeah, also we have to acknowledge that those were not made like in the same week. You know, he didn't say all those statements at the same time. Those are spread out across years. And certainly our collective understanding of genres evolves over time, as does all language and classification, essentially. So it's one thing, you know, if somebody will show me something back in the day, you know, and they're and say, you know, it belongs to this genre because they said so in 1985, versus what they say today, because people can change their minds, you know, that's normal, it's part of being a human being. um you know, sometimes they'll be like, back in the day, like, this is a character action game. I'm like, what the heck is that? We don't even use that anymore in the West, you
So
know?
yeah,
I've
so
got one of those really old books, Player's Guide, Nintendo's Player Guide, and they were categorizing things into like bonkers categories. It'd be like, you know, action, sports, jumping, and then that's it. And I was like, there's a lot more genres than just that these
well,
days.
and keep in
Yeah.
mind, yeah, we're talking about the Miyamoto helmed games in terms of what I'm discussing right now.
Uh-huh.
And so there, what you can see is Zelda is a bifurcated series to me because Zelda has had two directors, now three. But it really, for most of its time, it had two directors. One was Shigeru Miyamoto, and one was Eiji Aonuma. And that's where your problems begin, at least for me. And for a lot of gamers, because again, I get what you're saying about the language models, and I agree with that. Like, yeah, linguistics evolve over time, the definitions
Hmm.
and meanings of things evolve over time. But what never changes are the sales, especially when you're looking at an IP. And the games
Hmm.
that stick to that action RPG type motif, that open world, explore a vast, dangerous world, those games do really, really well. And the Anuma Zelda games, with one exception, and there's a specific reasoning behind why that one game did well, because it also masked itself as Ocarina of Time too. Um,
Well, I
for
don't know which game you're talking about, actually,
Twilight
to
Princess,
clarify.
Twilight
Oh, okay.
Princess.
I thought you were gonna say Breath of the Wild, or like,
Oh no!
I have
Oh
no idea
God,
which
no!
one.
Breath of the Wild's a return to form. Breath of the Wild's a return to that NES
Got it.
open
Yeah, yeah.
formula.
Now there were people who were like, Breath of the Wild's the first open world Zelda game. I was
Nope,
like, you've never played Zelda 1.
nope,
Like, come on.
sure isn't. So we know about Miyamoto and exploring caves of his youth, etc. So now I want to bring it over to Eiji Aonuma. His first game for Nintendo was Marvelous Another Treasure Island. It's a Japanese only game, and that became the blueprint for all of his Zelda projects. A lot of people don't explore Eiji Aonuma. That's why they think what I say is so controversial. So this game had a focus on side story, side characters, puzzles, and it de-emphasizes combat and openness. The game bombs in Japan. So first game, absolute bomb. Never brought it over to America because of this. And he says the following. He says, my first encounter with Zelda occurred in 1988, shortly after I joined Nintendo. After studying design in college, I began to work designing pixel characters. At the time, I didn't have much experience playing games, and I was particularly bad at playing games that required quick reflexes. So immediately after I started playing the original Zelda, I failed to read the movements of the Octorok in the field, and my game suddenly came to an end. Even after getting used to the controls, each time the screen rolled to a new area, a new Octorok appeared. And I thought to myself, am I going to have to fight these things forever? Eventually, I gave up getting any further into the game. The result is I was under the impression that The Legend of Zelda was not a game that suited me. So, what kind of games did suit me? Those would be text based PC point and click adventure games. For someone like me who enjoyed reading stories, these were games that allowed you to participate in the story and letting you experience the joy of seeing your own thoughts and actions affect the progression of the story. Plus, these games didn't require fast reflexes and don't require traditional gaming skills. So I thought that if I were going to make games, those were the types of games I would like to make.
Interesting. So that's is
That's
that his
Eiji Aonuma, who,
is that his pervading philosophy
yes.
today?
No, not
What's the
anymore.
date on
Not
that?
anymore
Yeah.
because time converts more than reason and
Right, right,
sales
right, right,
convert
right.
more than reason.
Yeah. How
So
what was the date on that
let
original
me let me let me
statement?
see if I've got it here. Let's see here.
Because I was gonna
That
say
was that
he's
was 2004, the GDC 2004 on how he hates
I got
classical
it.
Zelda and got to make Marvelous. Yep, that's 2004 GDC talk. There's a literally a there's a clip of that. I just transcribed it. So yeah, that was in 2004. So that's right prior to Wind Waker, I believe. This is after he had helmed with another guy on Majora's Mask. Wind Waker was his first Zelda. Then he had Twilight Princess, which Wind Waker did so badly that they brought Shigeru Miyamoto again to supervise on Twilight Princess. And that led to a lot of the Ocarina of Timeification. Now, there's still vestiges of Aonuma. You've got kind of the weirdo characters. You've got Evil Baby and Belly Shirt Clown and all these other fucking weirdo NPCs that take a lot of the focus on the story, and the Adventurers Club that nobody gives a shit about. Like, you've still got a lot of the Anumanisms in Twilight Princess, but it's got that darker fantasy motif that people have always attributed to Zelda that Shigeru Miyamoto brought back. And that game did well enough to where he got to go off on his own again, and he created Skyward Sword. And that game literally almost killed the franchise and lost to Dark Souls 2 in sales. Dark Souls, which the series of Souls literally began eating Nintendo's lunch as it gradually began to replace a lot of people's action-oriented Zelda fans. And they would go to that game instead. Um, to this day, like that's how I literally fell into the Souls games. Or like, hey, I know you hate this Anuma Zelda type stuff, so you should try Dark Souls out. And I fell in love and never looked back. Not until Breath of the Wild.
And then here I am. I've never played a Dark Souls, actually. As
They're
a
good. They're really, really good. They can be challenging, but I think
yeah,
it's
no, I get that. I get that. I played Elden Ring and Bloodborne, but I was playing Armored Core. So I was getting the From Soft design philosophy just with mechs and not with, fantasy
I need to
sword.
do some research into Miyazaki. If I had to guess, I would guess he was a classical Zelda fan, but I don't know. That's speculation, guys.
Oh, I could totally imagine. I mean, a lot of people always, point to Zelda 2 as the Dark Souls of its era. I avoided Dark Souls specifically. You remember this when game journalism would not stop comparing everything to Dark Souls. I was like, you know what? I'm never going to play Dark Souls because I don't want to slip into comparing everything to Dark Souls. Now,
Yeah,
it's much less
everything's the
of a
Dark
big
Souls
deal.
of everything. Yeah.
Right, right. It's a meme now. Nobody treats it seriously
Hmm.
anymore. So I would feel comfortable playing it now for sure.
Right. Yeah. Otherwise, yeah, because again, it kind of interferes with the analogy we talk about, which is like, what is it that makes a game? What is the influence in the creation of games? And if you just say, "Oh, it's the Dark Souls of it," kind of obscures that. It was very annoying for a long time. I feel you totally on that. So 360, so Displaced Appalachian says 360 PS3 was gaming's edgelord shock jock era. Gritty, violent for its own sake. Let's be culture driven instead of driving our own culture. Let's throw crap at the wall and see what sticks. 100%. And it was a response to Nintendo's Wii proposition. They gave Nintendo the heart of the gamer speech, got the middle finger from game developers. They love to tout the heart of the gamer speech now, like they all loved it. They fucking hated that speech. They rejected that speech, and the response was the Gears of War generation, as I like to call it, where everything's bombed out, depleted. Like it basically all gaming architecture became brutalist architecture during this time period.
Brutalist architecture. There we
Yep,
go.
everything is
Yeah.
bombed out, depleted, depressing.
And
Um,
I still hear a lot of the echoes that I heard from that time, which were people who made excuses for that were like, well, gamers grew up and now they want mature games, quote unquote
Bullshit.
mature, where mature just means as much gore,
Yep.
violence, and graphic content as you could stuff into it. I still hear that argument though. When Final Fantasy 16 rolled out, the first rated M, mainline game, People were like, well, gamers have grown up, they want mature stuff. And what none of those statements acknowledge is that gaming is not just for that first generation that did grow up. I've got kids who are growing up with video games. They're not grown up yet. Do they not get their own Final Fantasy that they get to grow up with? I think that there's an element of the maturity scene, and again, quote unquote maturity, because it's really immaturity, but the rating maturity, that does not acknowledge that games are for everyone. That does not mean that every game is for everyone, obviously not, but games as a whole are for everyone. And I think that folk online who maybe don't have kids, don't have, significant relationships with kids in their lives, lose sight of that fact. And they tend to think that gaming is kind of just for, the angry 30 somethings crowd.
Yeah, the yam demographic, the young adult male that was gaming's bread and butter since Nintendo's advertising in the 80s. And my message to that would be, I feel like gatekeeping is bullshit, and I feel like it hurts gaming actually. And what I mean by that is, in terms of part of Iwata's Heart of the Gamer speech was acknowledging the fact that the current gaming demographic is not going to be able to support gaming through a macroeconomic decline. And that was proven in 2008. What we need to do, and what I will tell anybody who makes an argument for gatekeeping, like, it's okay to gatekeep an IP or a franchise. Like, that's what the fans are supposed to do. But to gatekeep people out of gaming in general, the more gamers that are buying games, the more games that can be produced. The more gamers that are buying games, the better quality of games you get, and the more games you get. So I'll never understand gatekeeping the hobby in general. Um, like, if you have a right to advocate for your own happiness in terms of the franchises you love. I do that all the time. But what you don't well, you have a right to do it. What I guess I'm arguing you shouldn't do is try to keep new gamers from coming into this hobby, because all you're doing is
Right.
you're crippling
Right,
it. You're
right.
crippling your hobby.
Yeah. And I started to come around to that honestly with Fortnite. I don't have any interest in Fortnite. I don't have much interest in Minecraft, but to acknowledge that there are people who are younger than myself who do is to acknowledge that there's diversity in the industry and there should be diversity in the industry. I like certain types of games, but thank goodness those aren't the only games that they make.
Right.
Because yeah, that might be a little iffy. Now, I do want to ask you, what did you mean by gatekeeping a franchise specifically?
Yeah. So by gatekeeping franchise, and that's just individuals advocating for their own happiness. So I don't mean bully
Got
people
it.
out of bully customers saying you can't be in this franchise. I guess I should reword that a little bit more carefully. What I mean by that is, if you don't like what's going on in a franchise, i.e., if they attempt to turn your action RPG into a puzzle point and click adventure game, I have a right as a consumer to voice that, to not buy that, and to hopefully alter the course of their direction. Um,
Right, right, right.
in order to continue to make that franchise strong in my eyes. What I don't have a right to do is bully people and say, "Oh, Zelda's not for you," or "Gaming is not for you." I think that's bullshit.
Right, right, right. I think I see what you mean. There is an element that
Yeah, thanks for letting me
uh
clarify that, because yeah, it could have been
no, no,
taken.
no, that's
Yeah, it could have
good.
been taken
That's
wrong.
good. I think yeah, some folk listening might have been like, "Oh crap, did he say what I thought he said?"
Right
But
now,
once you explain
clarification.
it, like, yeah, that totally makes sense. Like advocating for your taste, essentially.
Everybody should
Um,
do that. Yeah.
right, everybody should do that. And I think that communities should allow people into communities who are dissenting voices who aren't going to, just show up to cause trouble. But communities need to acknowledge that there are multiple viewpoints within a community. What I hear a lot of the time is, well,
100%.
the community thinks, or the community has acknowledged, or the community has decided. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. A community is made up of individuals, and
100%.
individuals have individual ideas. There's no majority rules. A community is not a mob. Like, as soon as you compare it to the neighborhood that you live in, unless you live in like I don't even know, unless you live in like a gated community where everybody's, the exact same thing. whatever that would look like you're all part of the same club. But most communities, most neighborhoods that we live in are communities, but they're made up of different people from different backgrounds with different ideas on politics, on religion, on entertainment, and raising your children and education, and on and on and on and on. That is, I think, what's really needed to energize communities. I think what we see with communities is essentially echo chambers. And if you
Yes.
don't see a difference between an echo chamber and a community, I'm sorry, but you're the problem.
Oh, 100%. We also, so when we talk about dialectic and when we talk about speech, speech isn't only for the speaker. Speech is also for the listener. And what I mean by that is sometimes when you listen to a criticism, you find out that you're full of shit, and that's
Mm,
nothing but a good thing. It's okay to be wrong. That's one of the things I
right.
often say, kind of flippantly in conversation. I'll be talking to somebody, well, it's okay to be wrong. And sometimes they get mad, but it's like, whoa, no, wait, I'm talking about me as well. It's also
Mm.
okay if I'm wrong. In fact, I may thank you for it later because you correct something that's absolutely not correct. Um, and so if we don't listen to other people, if we don't listen to those dissenting voices, we never get a chance to explore our ideas and kind of put them up against other ideas. Steel sharpens steel, man. Um,
Yeah, it's essentially learning too. And like I want to share a little bit on this too.
yeah,
There's a couple things that I've butted up against that fall in line with this. One is like a very strong anti-intellectualism. And I say anti-intellectualism, not anti-intellectual,
right.
kind of pervading atmosphere out there. There's also an atmosphere of I don't want to learn anything. I
Yeah,
don't want to learn anything. And it's weird. It's weird to me when somebody says literally, I don't want to learn anything. That has happened to me in recent memory. And the context for that in recent memory has been starting up this new channel, Game Logica, in which I'm.
by the way, love the channel. Just want to interject real quick and just say,
Hey,
if you
thanks
if
very
you've not
much.
subscribed, go over there and do it. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate it very much. Thank you. It's been a long time, putting it together, putting these documentaries out. So the amount of work that's going into these, I'm really glad that people like them. But recently had the opportunity to share some of my culture, some native Hawaiian history, some stories that are absolutely at the risk of being lost. Especially when you look historically at it. I don't want to belabor this point, so just briefly, at one point, the Hawaiian population had been reduced by 73%.
Jesus.
The language itself was banned. Hula, which was the primary method of storytelling in the ancient Hawaiian culture, was illegal. And what that does to the stories of a culture is it eradicates them effectively, so that some people died and took stories with them. That to me is horrifying. So now to share
Mm,
those stories with a new audience, at least the stories that I know and can convey, I think that's important. It's important to me, obviously, because I belong to the culture, but it's also important on a wider kind of human note because these stories are our heritage as human beings. Like they have important value lessons, or they may be insights into a history and a culture that doesn't exist anymore. Um, and yet, in just trying to promote some of these videos, I actually did encounter people surprisingly who were like, I don't want to watch because I don't want to learn anything. And I was like, wow.
then why are you doing it?
Right. There are actually people who will refuse to watch something because they might risk learning something. That is kind of shocking to me. Really shocking.
It just, well, especially like is I think it's part and parcel. I don't think it's a new thing, but it seems to be getting worse in my
No.
eyes. It seems to be
Yeah,
getting a lot worse.
possibly. Yeah.
As you start to see this more and more happen, and I'll belabor the issue. As somebody who like adores Hawaii, um, what's going on there is criminal. It's still ongoing, and
Yeah. There's a lot of issues there. Yeah.
it's very important that. And again, I won't get too far into the weeds here, but just it's important to kind of look and see what's going on there. Um,
Yeah.
in particular, with what just happened with the wildfire, in particular, in what's going on with the water, the clean water there.
Mhm.
It's important people understand what's happening there. It
Mhm.
100% is. But
Yeah.
outside of that, the uh, the continued bifurcation and tribalism going on, not just here but all over the world, I think is also having that effect of that anti-intellectualism. I think you're starting to see people just be like, "Hey, if it's not coming from one, two, or three sources that I really, really trust, I don't want to hear it."
Uh, yeah. There's probably a crossover of that thought with game reviews itself.
Oh, you
You
absolutely
often
see that.
hear the advice of, and this is not bad advice in itself, I think, but there's a potential for it to become a vice, and that's where when people will be like, find a handful of reviewers that you already agree with, and listen to their reviews. And the plus side of that is you'll understand the language that that reviewer uses
Hmm.
when they review, so you know what they mean, but at the same time, that may prevent you from hearing other sides on a game that you're already pre-convinced of. So, in some capacity, whether that's, I already have preconceived this game is good or bad or will sell well or won't sell well or whatever, you're essentially looking for confirmation bias at some point, and I think that's a pretty dangerous slope to be on.
Oh, anytime you feel that confirmation bias setting in, like you hit the eject button. That's always what I
Yeah.
try to do,
Yeah.
and try
And
to
it's
go
hard,
somewhere.
it's tempting, because we naturally want to gravitate toward people who agree with us. But there's a danger there, I think, of stilting and stunting our uh capabilities, let's say.
Well, it's the same thing when you get that cognitive dissonance feeling. When someone triggers that in you, I often tell people, like, don't run from it, because the immediate response is to put your shields up and get defensive and run from that. No, if someone's
Mhm.
triggered fucking cognitive dissonance in you, it's because you're probably wrong at that point. Um,
Yeah.
because when you get to that point where where you feel like you're holding those two views at the same time that don't really mesh together, yep, there's something wrong. You need to pay attention to that.
Mm.
Then that kind of brings us to game critique. So, one of the things you have a site called the Pixels too, which was, as we interacted, I began to read the reviews on the Pixels and
I
kind of to
appreciate it.
to look at your long term form critiques. You've got shorter kind of reviews, and I want to
Mhm.
get your opinion on something, and we can kind of talk a little bit about your process there. So, there's another channel called the Electric Underground. Are you familiar with this channel?
No, I don't
Okay.
think so.
See, Electric Underground he plays games like beat 'em ups, shmups, action games. Like, basically, he plays games that come from that arcade route, because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's two direct routes of modern gaming. One is the arcade, aside from sports games, which are kind of their own thing. But you've got the arcade and you've got the PC, kind
Yeah.
of the traditions. And of course, you used to have, although more and more consoles are just PCs hooked up to TVs. You used to have the tradition of the console, which was, as Nintendo said in the Nintendo Fun Club newsletter, the best of both worlds. So, for example, in the NES, The Legend of Zelda was a game you couldn't do on a PC because the PC wasn't good at the time of doing those tactile games that, you know needed those skilled reflexes, gameplay, etc. And it was also a big game that you couldn't do in the arcade because of quarter munchers. And so it's literally the best of both worlds. I feel like consoles have kind of lost their identities at this point, and I feel like that's
Some
still a
of them, yeah.
process that's ongoing. But Electric
Mhm.
Underground, so I'm getting off track. So Electric Underground basically stated that in his mind, game reviewers and people who do game critique should be skilled players. And he actually views the lack of skilled players as a serious issue in the game critiquing space. I just want to get your opinion on that, since he opened up a real dust storm on that one.
Yeah. So it's a strong statement, and I think that when he made it, he realized, it's a strong statement.
Yeah.
Um, but I think there's two sides of it,
Okay.
you know? So, like, nobody on this planet is going to be good at everything,
Right.
just flat out. Nobody on this planet is going to be good at every game. Maybe there might be a couple, like, prodigies who are good at every single video game that they ever play. But I think it's safe to say that most people are attuned to certain skills that are facilitated by certain video games, right?
Right.
So, I acknowledge that as a reviewer, as much as I acknowledge my own biases. I think if you're going to have honest reviews, you need to acknowledge whatever biases you have built into you, because nobody is not biased. You know, if they want to say unbiased news, not true. Everybody's biased,
Yeah.
and at some way, shape, or form. And in the same fashion, everybody has their own skill set. Now, you can grow other skills and cultivate them and improve them as much as you can. But I think that most people start off, you know, in life geared towards certain skills and they can improve those. So for me, based on my experiences and the kinds of games that I've played, I think I'm skilled at navigating RPGs
Hmm.
and kind of exploring them thematically, as well as understanding them from a gameplay perspective. I'm good at side scrollers. I'm good at platformers. I'm pretty good at beat 'em ups. I'm not good at shooters. I'm
Bullet
okay
hell
at third
schmups.
person shooters. I'm not good as at first person shooters at all. At all. And I this is not for lack of trying. I remember when we were in school, there was an N64 at the school, and the rule was if you won whatever round of game it was that you were playing, you got to pick the next game. So I would camp on Smash 64 and just play Blue Kirby over and over again until somebody finally beat me, and then of course they'd switch it to GoldenEye. Once that happened, I could never get, you know, Smash back on the TV
Damn.
because
Yeah.
uh, I was just not good at first person shooters, and I still am not. So to answer your question though, um, it reminds me of Dean, right, when he played Cuphead,
Oh God,
uh,
I remember that. Yeah.
the
Oh, I
much
was
maligned Cuphead
painful. Very
tutorial.
painful to watch.
It was very painful to watch. At a certain point, you're like, okay, and this person's going to review this game. Now, as I recall, he didn't.
That's the
Right,
thing, and that's why that gets so blown out of proportion. He actually did not.
right.
Yeah, he
And
did
he
not. He was
also
there for
said
a preview.
exactly. He also said he acknowledges that he's not good at that type of game. That's also my kid brother because he grew up playing shooters. So he's like the opposite of me. Now, I've seen my kid brother try to play side scrolling platformers, like 2D platformers, and he's awful at that. He can't judge distance at all. You know, he'll get up right close to the edge of the pit, jump straight up, and move forward in midair, and then
Oh
at the
shit!
apex of the jump, and then fall right in. And it's pathetic to watch, but it's like me playing a shooter.
Right,
So now, as far as reviews go, that means I probably am not the best person to review GoldenEye.
right.
I don't have the amount of experience in the genre and the skill set to be able to look at that. Now, if I am to give my opinion on GoldenEye, I can do that. But I think, you know, there's a there's kind of like a vague notion of like all opinions are valid. And I'm not even talking about validity, but if you give me the choice between an uninformed opinion and an informed one, I'm gonna pick the informed one every time
One hundred
because
percent.
that is just rational. Like, and I'm not saying the uninformed one isn't valid. I'm not saying if I gave an opinion on GoldenEye that it's not valid, whatever that means. But the one that's more valuable is going to be the one that has the most information. And so that's absolutely somebody who is more familiar with
So
shooter. Hopefully that answers that question.
yeah, so I feel like that's kind of what he was getting at, and he
Uh-huh.
just worded it strongly so we could have the dialectic, is what I feel like.
Right.
But
This is the internet. You know, you got to make
exactly,
something sensational. You
yeah.
got to have the
So,
headlines stand
but
out.
I
Yeah.
think this is, and that's what in my dialogue with him, basically what I was talking with him about is I said, I think what you mean is because look at the kind of games that he likes. He likes beat 'em ups, he likes shmups, he likes action arcade games. I think there's a real point to be made that the people who review modern games, the PlayStation babies aforementioned, probably aren't going to be very good at those games, and as such, they're probably going to do not a great job in explaining the intricacies of those games and getting information to modern audiences about those games. And I can see where that would be frustrating, I guess.
Yeah, I think there's a frustration for it. I also think like you can look past the mainstream, you know. There are a lot of really great sites. Uh I
Well, and
almost
that's what
did a
I told him. His site's literally one of those where,
right, yeah.
like, if I
Yeah.
want to know how good the M2 shot trigger port of Don Don Pachi DOJ is, I'm gonna go to the Electric Underground. I'm not gonna go to fucking IGN for that. I'm not gonna go to fucking IGN for anything.
Right.
But
Yeah, no,
definitely not
I
for
hear
a
that.
fucking shmup bullet hell from the 2000s. Fucking fuck no.
Yeah. Well, I mean, too, if say you're looking for retro reviews, on my cutoff is like pre-80s stuff. So
Right.
like if you want to talk about, like 1970s text adventures and muds and things that I could boot one up and give you, a first impression, but I don't have the knowledge base to be able to really kind of unpack those and explain why they're valuable.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of in a pickle because part of my content is I've got over 400 Switch games, and gradually I'm going to review the entire Switch, my entire backlog of Switch games. I'm going to do my reviews on.
But yeah, that's a lot.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think I've got like 18 up so far on my
Nice.
YouTube. Um, so yeah, it's gonna be a long fucking haul. Right now, I'm playing Trails to Zero and Batman Arkham Trilogy, which is really just Batman Arkham Asylum because for some reason they left the other two games off the fucking cart, so those don't exist for some reason. Um,
Wah, wah, wah.
yeah, but long story short is yeah, I've kind of thought about how I'm gonna get to that. Like when I play Skyward Sword or when I play a game like the 3D Mario games, like yeah, people need to know that hey, these aren't really my games of choice. Like I'll tell you what I think of them, but they're not really my games of choice. And I think that's important up front to give somebody going into that.
It's also fair. It acknowledges not a weakness, but like a limitation. Um, but everybody's going to have that limitation.
Well, and
Nobody
who
knows
knows?
everything.
Maybe
Nobody
my
is
my
good at
tastes have
everything.
changed. You know,
Yeah, that's possible too.
it's we'll
Yeah,
find out.
definitely. I see you, Mad Belmont. There's some folks sneaking
Oh
in
yeah,
chat here.
we're gonna go through. Actually, we gotta get some chat rolling because we've been old man yakking for a while here.
Steamrolling.
So yeah, so Dan Caparello says New Super Mario Brothers for DS was the first 2D Mario since SNES. Yeah, we resolved that, so that's resolved, not we. So we're good on that.
Oh yeah,
Um,
some of those are going back. Let me see
yeah,
what we got
yeah.
here.
Amusement, mindless versus entertaining. Displaced appellation says, and there's nothing wrong with that as a genre, but as an overarching cultural tone, it sucked. Talking about the era of brown and gray. Well, then he says, more speaking to PS3, Xbox, part of why we was so refreshing was its change in tone and smash. Well, yeah. Well, it really went back to those old NES, SNES fundamentals. Like, look at all the games that sold really well for that console. Donkey Kong Country Returns, Punch Out, which actually did pretty good. Wii Sports. A lot of people don't know this, but the golf courses from Wii Sports were literally ripped right from the NES games. Take away the motion control for a second, guys. Look at the Wii controller. Turn it on its side. Is that not an NES controller? Yes, it is. Less buttons, less complication. Um, a lot of the Wii's design, just like Breath of the Wild's design, was they they moved forward by looking back, not necessarily by trying to do something creative.
Mm.
Mario 64 was the best-selling game of the fifth generation. We resolved that as well. It outsold any PS1 game. Yeah, 35-ish million in 64s. Yeah, not good. Yeah, DN. Damn, I'm seeing numbers all over the place for PS1, actually. Yeah, it's kind of hard to get those old numbers down. Um, so collects, yo, what's going on, Chill? What's going on, buddy? Thanks for coming in. Dan says some sites say 10 million, some say 11, some say 14. And then he says, I stand corrected. Yep, that's okay. Again, it's okay to be wrong, man. I'm wrong all the time. Don't bring up Quest 64. Yep, we don't know what you're talking about, Dan.
No, I never heard of it.
Yeah, I was
Never.
getting old Wikipedia info about sales numbers. LOL. Yeah, Wikipedia. Uh, Wikipedia is great for sourcing, but yeah, looking at Wikipedia can be very dangerous. Like as
Yeah.
Mage,
Hey, I
he had
edited
to,
it,
yep,
you know?
he had to come
Yeah.
in there and say, hey, guys,
Yeah. Anybody
um,
can do it.
Tiger Castle. I am remember playing B-17 Bomber on the Intellivision. Some of my earliest video game memories.
And
Well, you
television.
are old school tough, man. That is awesome
The
to hear.
OG console war in television versus Atari.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's my
Some of
fucking
those
dad's
classics.
era. I love that.
Yeah, that's a long time ago.
Then he said, yeah, Tiger Castle, more like Tiger Saber-tooth Tiger. Then he says, yeah, the well-read mage, yeah, made me into oil because I'm a fossil. Yeah, you actually are gonna be older than me, which is saying something in this hobby. That's good. Um, so then that's a fascinating read, Dan Caparello. I think some level creators are allowed to shift and change their creation, unrespective of projected sales numbers. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, it's okay to try new things, but when a pattern establishes, keep in mind at the end of the day, that's one of the things. Like, yeah, we're making art, but also we're making art to sell. So, do you want your art to sell, or do you not want your art to sell? If the direction is consistently less than what it was doing before, which if you adjust like the Legend of Zelda OG sales for macroeconomics, and I've got a breakdown of this actually. Actually, yeah, let me get back to the research doc real quick. But yeah, breakdowns of the original Zelda is actually pretty interesting to look at. So 6.51 million sales on the NES, right? Now, if you look at the macroeconomics surrounding this, include population. So at the time there was 4 billion, okay, 960,567,912 people estimated on the planet. Now in 2023, that population increased by 62.45%, guys. So that doesn't account. This doesn't even account for everything. But Zelda, if you adjust, do the adjustment for macroeconomics, Zelda would have sold 10,575,495 on that one system. Now that doesn't even account for everything. Other factors include the cold market. Atari crash had occurred a year prior, and Nintendo had to use Rob the Robot to Trojan horse their way into toy stores, as there was retailer skepticism over video games in the US. This meant that software was limited and scarce in the early days of the system. In 1988, there was also a cartridge shortage that year, and reprints of popular games, including OG Zelda, um, couldn't find them. My dad's friend could not find OG Zelda until a re release at the very end of the NES lifespan after the Super Nintendo had already come out.
Dang.
So that restricted those sales further. Um, and he was constantly borrowing our game because of that. We borrowed a little game called Life Force, by the way. So a lot of that was also kind of a fun thing of the old school days because games were so expensive, and because they were so scarce, you would borrow games a lot from people and shit. You kind of swap games, etc. Finally, The Legend of Zelda was an unknown entity that had to build an entirely new market from scratch. Nobody had a clue or expectation as to what the fuck a Zelda game even was in 1986. An advantage future games would have. So all other Zelda games had the establishment of a brand, and they still underperformed OG Zelda. Right? No global market. Nintendo had a slow start in the North America and Europe due to the crash of 1985. So got to keep that in mind. The Soviet Union was largely restricted for Japan until the early 90s. China had a complete ban on consoles from 2000 to 2015 and was highly restricted prior to this as well, right? So, marketing budgets. There were very little marketing budgets outside of the association with NES marketing and Nintendo Power. Zelda 2 would later have proper marketing budget thanks to the success of the first game, but the first game had no marketing budget, just word of mouth. Then you've got inflation or the devaluing currency. So back in 1986, the NES retailed for 140 to 150 US dollars, depending on where you shopped, right? And The Legend of Zelda cost $101.45 back in 1987. So that's assuming there was no markup, and there always was due to supply chain issues. So if you do the inflation calculator, yeah, you're talking about, yeah, that same item would cost $101.45 from 1987 to 2023, you're looking at a cumulative inflation rate of 167%, guys. So all of those are factors. And yeah, you can say that the OG Zelda game only did 6.75 million, but that's not taking into account all of those macroeconomic factors that show that the sales for Zelda 1 were actually massively depressed in comparison to what other games. So then now that's what I mean by when I look at a game like Wind Waker and it sells 4 million, or I look at a game like Skyward Sword, even worse, that sells less than 4 million on a console of 100 plus million install base. I don't know how anybody can look at those numbers and not see a massive decline, especially when your OG game sold 6.75 million non-adjusted macroeconomically. Like, it's pathetic, quite frankly. Those sales. So that's what I mean by it. Yeah, you're free to do whatever you wish. Like, as a creator, you can take that franchise in a direction that the fans disagree with. I would argue you'll be punished for it, though. And it's ultimately up to them how long they can weather and withstand that. But Mage, what do you think of that?
Yeah, you know what? I always make this joke with my wife too.
Yeah.
Numbers, they scare me like spiders.
Numbers.
I'm so bad with numbers, like I short circuit. I'm what was it, left? No, right brain.
Sure.
I'm so right brain I
So
can't.
that's kind of that was basically a load of waffle to you.
It's what I mean, it's fascinating, but yeah, I'm so far out of the loop on anything numerical.
Yeah,
Like,
the too long don't read it is 6.75 million in 1986 is absolutely a world shattering phenomenon. Now look at a
right, yeah,
game
yeah,
like
yeah.
Mario that sells 40 million, or a game like
Yeah,
Mario 3 that sells 30 million. Holy
getting a
shit, man!
hang of like how different the industry was is pretty important, I
Yeah,
think.
basically 6.75 million in 1986 trumps Twilight Princess's 8 some odd million in 2006, basically. Yeah, 20
Yeah.
years of macroeconomic growth, and it still only does that. And that game fared better than most. Keep in mind that was Anuma's high point. That was Anuma's only high point, outside of the dual collaboration with the guy he's training now. And again, I will give Anuma this credit: he did correct course with Breath of the Wild. Some would argue he kind of slipped back with Tears of the Kingdom into some of his Anumisms, which kind of explains why that game hit a sales wall. But I would need more time in order to see exactly what my opinion on Tears of the Kingdom is. It doesn't hold my attention like Breath of the Wild does. I keep falling off Tears of the Kingdom. Breath of the Wild just held my attention. So
Yeah. Did you play through Tears of the Kingdom?
I've not. I
I don't
keep falling off. I
yeah,
keep
I
falling
don't
off
think I
that game.
finished it either. Yeah. It's huge.
And then Dan Caparello says, I think this discussion is revealing why I like Wind Waker so much. And see, that may be the case. So if you love puzzles and you love stories and not so much combat in Zelda, absolutely. You're gonna love Wind Waker. You might even love Skyward Sword. Now that they removed those awful fucking motion controls they tied it to. Which I think was also, to be fair, I think that was a problem with it made you buy Wii Motion Plus. That's one of those macroeconomic factors I'm talking about. And a lot of people weren't going to buy that for a Zelda game at the twilight years of the Nintendo Wii. So that could also be a factor. Could also be a factor. Um, for sure. But yeah, 100%. And that's the thing. Like, when I talk about the decline in Zelda sales, there's no reason there honestly can't be both games. You can make the open world classical Zelda, and you can make the Anuma style Zelda, because if we're talking about any other fucking video game, 4 million is they would kill for 4 million, Mage. They would kill to have 4 million sales. That's pretty fucking good by most video game standards. So
Yeah, it seems like it.
as long as you keep that budget within range, like, there's no reason we can't have both the puzzle chore time Zelda that Dan likes and the action oriented Zelda that I like 100%. Um, since we've got a lot of RPG discussion going, to jump medium here, thoughts on lit RPG, stories written with RPG mechanics as an active trope. Feel free not to address it if it's too odd to derail. Well, we call this the jump around podcast because we literally can jump in 50 different fucking directions at once. So you're good. So I'm not familiar with that, but Mage, are you familiar with Lit RPG? Because it sounds really interesting.
I'm not super familiar with it, but yeah, it's literary role playing game, so it's books,
Okay.
but written with kind of like gameplay in mind. um,
Interesting.
the
Okay.
ones that I've tasted, because I don't think I ever really like got one of these and sat down. I love reading books, so
Me
you
too.
would think that this would be like a huge like best of both worlds kind of thing.
Right.
The ones that I sampled, it just really seems kind of gimmicky, like
Okay.
a choose your own adventure story. And it turns out like it's not a compelling read when you've made 3 or 4 decisions and then you wind up with a game over and you have to go back and find your page and stuff like that. So it's not my cuppa, but I'm sure it has its fans. It's kind of niche though, it seems like. It's not like a super popular thing.
Okay.
Um, I don't know. I don't know if I've known any fans of lit RPGs. Maybe Displaced is.
Well,
Um,
I think we just found one, and I'm definitely going to do
yeah,
some research on that after we get off of here
yeah.
because that does sound.
It's worth looking at because it's a novel idea, unintended. But it's check it out. You might like it.
Right. So we've got Displaced also says RE the gatekeeping combo. Diversity of thought is only a threat if folks only know what they ought to think instead of how to think a position through. Yeah, we do a great disservice, especially in modern education. A lot of time is spent on teaching people what to think, and less time is spent on teaching people how to think. I feel like I think
Mm,
that's a good way to put that.
yeah, I'd agree.
Um, Dan says, I got to bounce. Thanks for the chat. Lots of good info and fun combo. Dan, thanks for checking out and hope to see you back, man. It's been great having this dialectic with you, man. I appreciate it. Steel sharpens steel. Always remember that. Definitely hope to see you back here. And Belmont comes in, sneaks in like a solid snake, motherfucker. What's up, y'all? What's going on, Belmont? What's going on? He says, hey, Mage.
Yo, yo, yeah. And I
Hmm.
slipped a nod to him when he popped in. I saw him. He's a
So
cool guy. Interact with him on Twitter.
So Keithius LG says, Intellivision was the first console my family had. Was so sad that my mom sold it in about 30 games after we got our NES. Oh man.
Now, do you know is in television? There was a Emiko recently, right? And that wound up
Oh
being
God, yeah, that whole
yeah, that
fucking
wound up
train
being a
wreck.
whole thing.
Tommy Tallarico.
Um, as Atari has been putting out some new consoles that have like built-in games and stuff like that.
Hmm.
I think they just released like a new like mini, which is cool for people from that time, who may remember those games. I can appreciate on the one hand that like emulation may not be perfect, and it may not have all the features you want, but I think on the other hand, a lot of people will have a casual relationship with gaming at best based on like a 40-year memory.
Hmm.
So having something that's affordable and convenient to set up and play is going to be something that they'll find valuable.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's the thing. Like most of those, yeah, because fuck, I think most Ataris are actually broke in the wild now. I think I read somewhere.
Mine is.
Yeah, they just don't
That's
work
for
anymore.
sure. Yeah, they're old.
It's sad.
They're very
Even some
old.
of the NESs are starting to go, guys.
Oh man, my yeah. Mine has got that spring problem.
Yeah.
But I need to pop it open clean
I ended up
sometime.
having to buy a new one in the box one. Had to go on and buy one. That was expensive.
It happens. Yeah, they're getting up there.
But I don't want to use one because I want to get full lifespan out of it. So it's just been sitting there. So it works like a charm. I don't even really have any of the pin bending issues yet. It will.
Mm,
I run my NES pretty well. So
yeah. Yeah.
then Chinzwega says we need Zelda 2 gameplay. Well, it's funny you mention that. There's somebody working on a game. I don't know if you've seen this, Mage. It's called Sheep Boy.
I don't think I have. No.
Yeah, let me see if I can get the Sheep Boy.
Is it 2 words? 1 word?
I'm looking now because I can't remember, but let's see. Let's try 2 words. Let's just search it, not in Twitter. Maybe just search Sheep Boy game. Not the sheep game. Sheep Boy game Zelda 2. Sheep Lad. Okay, that's why. That would be why. Sheep Lad.
Oh yeah. I don't think I've seen this. This looks like very much like an indie spiritual successor type thing.
Yes. Looks very cool.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
bring it
yeah.
to Switch. Bring it to Switch, and I will absolutely do that.
Yeah,
100%.
this could
Like,
fit in on Switch,
oh
definitely.
hell yeah, hell yeah. I would love to see it come to Switch because we need an actual Zelda 2 because we got one sort of Adventure Island 2 on the SNES. Was sort of a Zelda 2.
Oh yeah, that's the one it had an overworld, didn't
Uh
it?
huh. Yep.
Yeah,
It
I remember
scaled.
that.
Yeah, it had scale. Yep. And then this place says gonna have to bounce myself. Awesome combo. Much love, all. Mage, you're my dude, bro. Just sub to Flip the Switch YouTube channel. Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Have a good night and Game of Logica forever.
Thanks, this place.
Thanks, man. I
Appreciate you.
appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you around, man. We have some doozies sometimes. So that brings us into that actually brings us into Game of Logica. So we've covered early days on Twitter. We've covered the pixels. What brought up the idea of doing Game of Logica, which is literally something right after my fucking like right after my heart, man. Like some of these detailed
Nice.
dives into the mythology behind video games, the mythology behind them. So, what was it that made you think about doing that as a YouTube project?
So that idea is like 2.5 years old.
Okay.
I mean, this thing was in development for a long time, and eventually I set it aside, just because there were other projects to work on, So, I was encouraged by a couple of really good friends to keep pursuing it, and went through a bunch of different iterations in private, trying to work with editors and really trying to come up with like a visual identity. But it's a lot of work, and I'm not a video producer at all. My skill set is very much in writing and
Me too.
all that, not in trying to stitch together videos. So like, yeah, I've been telling people it takes me 10 minutes to write a script. It takes me 10 days to do a
Same,
15-minute video.
same.
It takes a freaking long time. So I'm trying to work on that, so we can get more content out. But the nucleus of that is, I went to school for a theology degree.
Okay.
Never really used it for anything. Um, but I guess this is the best use that it's ever gotten. It was exciting research, but it stemmed from childhood. Growing up in Hawaii, there's a lot of, and I know I mentioned in the trailer for the
Hmm.
channel, but it's a really diverse place, and that means a lot of mixing of beliefs and ideas and mythologies and legends and religions and spirituality and on and on and on. All like the folklore and culture mixes together into a lot of different fascinating combinations. And so when I was a kid, I would always raid the mythology section at my local library. I enjoyed reading paranormal magazines. When X-Files came out, I was like an instant fan. Definitely too young to watch the show, but I watched it anyway.
Oh, that's an
Um,
amazing show.
oh yeah, one of my favorites still. I'll wait every few years, I'll rewatch it. So really, and I think what X-Files does so well is it gives you two characters who could not be more different,
Uh huh.
but but emphasizes their search for the truth. But whatever the truth kind of represents for them, essentially X-Files is about the search for something. And like, recently watching it, I was like, oh, this is kind of about loneliness as well. Um,
Yeah,
it's a really layered show, I think. It
yeah.
is, yeah.
It's their attempts to define meaning. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, which I think is really human. And also kind of plays into a lot of these stories, so Making Gameologica was really exciting. I always tell people you don't have to be religious to watch the show. It's not about my beliefs, whatever they are. I'm not really public about those things. It's kind of like sharing my family. Like I don't do it very often at all. Because not what my content is about anyway, but it's really about exploring these concepts in games and through games. So sometimes it's like, hey, where did the Master Sword idea come from? Or sometimes it's like, um like with the like say the Dragon Quest episode,
Yes.
I had a thought of like, where did slimes come from, right? Like there's slimes all over RPGs, there's slimes in Dungeons and Dragons, but like, are there any actual like slime monsters in mythology? And it turns out not really. There's like barely any. So I would never say for all of these videos that they're kind of like, hey, here's the through line of inspiration. Like here's where they got this idea. I would never say that.
It's more of an
Um
exploration of
exactly,
where
exactly.
these ideas might have come from.
Exactly, because it's all a collective group of ideas, right? There's cultures around the world. There's not really many isolated cultures these days. There were in the past, and so they have their own stories. But today, we all kinds of share in those stories, and
Well, and
that
it's
absolutely bleeds
fascinating
into
how
games.
so many cultures that never interacted still produced certain archetypical story progressions.
Yeah. No, absolutely. The Hawaii is a perfect example. I mean, Hawaii lived in complete isolation for hundreds of years. And they'll still have I one point I thought they did not have a dragon in their mythology. And I was like, "Ooh, that's rare," because like
That's
almost every
just about
culture.
every culture. Yeah,
Yeah.
whether
And
it's
they
Tiamat,
do,
whether it's Tiamat the uh, with the Epic of Gilgamesh, or whether
but
it's the Saint
yeah.
George with the English mythology.
Exactly, exactly. And no matter on the globe. And so they had the mo'o, which was a kind of like a giant gecko, really that Maui fought. And I was like, I guess that's pretty close.
That's damn
Um,
close. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I don't think it breathed fire. I think it breathed noxious fumes. But so it's close, you know.
It's
Um,
the great beast the hero has to slay.
Exactly, exactly. It's the questing beast.
Hmm.
And so it's really been exciting for me. We got to look at red mages and Dragon Quest slimes and the Master
You
Sword.
had you had to
Uh
do red mages, man.
it felt like the right place to start with.
Yes, yeah, had to.
Yeah, and so we had just finished a two-parter exploring the Mana series. We published a new episode today. That was about the Mana series, the Hero King and King Kamehameha. Um
Yeah, I'm excited
but
to get into that.
it was a lot of fun to put together, and again, it's been a delight to share these stories. Some of them which I just learned, even as a native Hawaiian myself. But coming up in the near future, I kind of stumbled upon some ancient legends about capturing ghosts,
Okay,
and I was like, "Oh, we should do a Ghostbusters episode."
should I be
But
scared?
yeah, but like ancient Ghostbusters. So that could be fun. And then I
Interesting.
also want to do one on Castlevania. The Mad Belmont's here. I saw his name. There's
He,
going to be a Castlevania episode coming up soon. Makes total sense. I want to do one on the inverted castle. Um,
ooh,
are
good
there
concept.
any kind of inverted worlds or inverted castles or inverted mansions in mythology? There are, and I think that they're pretty exciting. So I don't want
Ooh,
to spoil what those are.
and Belmont be a good reference for that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He says,
Yeah,
"You've got my
absolutely.
attention." Belmont said.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yeah, Belmont, remind me. I need to DM you. Actually,
yep,
I do have some questions.
yeah. Belmont
This
will.
is very much like the exciting thing about Gameologica for me. Also, is reaching out to other creators. So I've had people do voice cameos. The guy that we had voice Kamehameha was really awesome. He does this great like Keith David, like Hawaiian voice for
Damn.
Kamehameha. Yeah, I got chills the first time I heard it. But then there's other creators that I'm reaching out to for research. Because again, I don't know everything, and I got to find the people who know a lot about a topic. So Belmont, I got to DM you sometime. Remind me.
Yeah, 100%. If you ever need any Zelda knowledge, holler at your boy.
There you go.
That's
Yes.
kind of
Oh,
my
and
that's kind
yeah.
of my thing. And by the way, you hit it perfect. I just want to say, Sword in the Stone, you hit it perfect.
Yeah.
You
And that
absolutely hit
one,
that
yeah.
master. So you hit it perfectly.
There
Yes.
was. there's that extra story in that one of the staff in the tomb.
Yes,
And
it's
I
yeah,
was like,
it's the entombed weapon. Yeah, it's a
yeah, and I had no
classic
idea.
trope.
I hadn't heard of that story before doing the research
Weapon of
and was
destiny.
just blown away, Crazy.
Yep, definitely. Just like a lot of people, it's people are surprised, but it's like it's obvious to me. It's like that's a Japanese take on Sleeping Beauty of Zelda 2.
Yeah, definitely.
One hundred
Absolutely.
percent. All of
Absolutely.
these games pull that to me. That's actually the most important part. Like you wouldn't have like Mario wouldn't be what it is without the Mushroom Kingdom,
Yeah.
which is based on Alice in Wonderland essentially, and other
Mm.
works of literary nonsense like the Arabian Nights, like Gulliver's Travels, um,
Yeah.
with the castles in the sky and shit. Like yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's like Mario is essentially an isekai, right? Like he's
yep.
taken from the
Uh-huh.
regular world and thrown into
Well,
his own.
and that's where Mario kind of got off track is because they basically started making Mario a denizen of the Mushroom Kingdom. And
Yeah.
instead like,
Yeah.
no, bullshit. He's a fucking plumber from Brooklyn. Stop this shit.
He's a regular everyday guy.
Like, yeah, and he shows up in this wild ass world. But yeah, Isekai's a good that's perfect. Yeah. Yeah, he's Alice in Wonderland. He's Gulliver doing his travels. That's who he is.
Yeah.
Um yeah, 100%. Fantastic. But yeah, I just want to appreciate that episode because so many people just don't even notice that. And it was very nice to see. Very nice to see.
I appreciate it.
That
I'm glad you liked
that
it.
dark Western mythos is very key to Zelda. And again, the further they get away from it, more trouble they get into. It's part of what makes me kind of retch a little bit at Tears of the Kingdom. I feel a little bit sick thinking about it, but it's probably just a food poisoning. Um, but basically, it's like the whole thing about Legend of Zelda is you're a knight in dark fantasy wonderland. That's Zelda. And I don't feel like a knight in dark fantasy wonderland when I'm fusing all these fucking pieces of shit together instead of swinging around a knightly sword. I don't care for it. Like it
Hey,
doesn't
your
feel.
sword's broken in Tears of the Kingdom too.
Yeah, and bringing Man Ganon back is weird. Like rehydrated Ganon is weird. Especially
Is there a portmanteau for that? Manon?
yeah,
Manganon?
Manon,
I
yeah,
don't know.
Man
That's
Ganon.
where
Because
my brain went.
me being a fan of Pig Ganon and me actually really liking what they did with Calamity Ganon, I feel like the fact that this universe is so divorced from the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands, it seems like years of Link and Ganon's clashes over time, that all that's left is his absolute like rage and desire to destroy all of Hyrule. And so he's more of a calamity. He's more of like a force of nature at this point than
Mm.
any sentient threat to Hyrule. And I fucking love that, Mage. And then they just turn back around and all the Sheikah tech is gone because fuck it. Why do we have to have a sense of continuity? Well, fuck it. Why bother, right? And instead we have the Zonai. And even though we just established that all that is left is Ganon's malice, now Man Ganon is back. And that's weird. And he's walking and he's talking and he's sentient. And he's just the typical mustache twirling villain. Never mind, and never mind Calamity again. And we're not going to explain how he went from Calamity to being a man again. We're not. Fuck it. We don't care. And I guess my question is, if they don't care, why do I care? Like,
I like again. I didn't finish it, so I can't
yeah,
really say.
I
Don't
can
know if
nitpick
there
this
is one
game to
in there.
death. Like, you've got the bird village, you got the fucking bird village up north, and they're literally sitting around. It's cold now, and they're literally starving to death. It's like, oh, gee, if only you could do something like, gee, I don't know, fly south for the winter. Maybe if you could, I don't know, fly and leave and go somewhere else. Like it.
Yeah, you tell the bird people what. Tell them how to get out of their town. That's what they need.
Well, yeah, because okay, so it's cold and there's no food anymore. Well, I guess you can fucking starve, or you can do what birds do and have a migratory culture and go south.
Boom.
Like
There you
you
go.
could do that, but no, we don't care. We don't care. This is just a this is a I don't know what the fuck that game is. Again, I need to give it more of a chance, but like I don't like being in the menu. You're constantly in the fucking goddamn menu in that game. You're constantly having to make arrows and doodads and fuse pieces of shit together as they break. And dehydrated Ganon has a curse that makes all regular weapons that I want to fucking use brittle, so they die after 2 hits. I guess when he decided to do his plot of stealing all the lotion in Hyrule to rehydrate, I guess the lack of lotion also damaged the weapons. I don't know. Um, that's what I tell myself that plot is. It's like Ganon's just trying to get all the lotion. Like,
Honestly, I don't even remember the plot. I gotta finish the game
yeah.
at some point.
So yeah, other than that, like yeah, just but keep doing what you're doing with the channel. I can tell you, as someone who just got into actual video making, it's a process for sure. Um, I used to just talk over bad screenshots is what I used to do, and I finally
Mhm.
actually started making some fucking videos. And I would not call my videos good. I would genuinely say that there's some craft in what you're doing. So I appreciate the effort for sure.
I appreciate it. Thanks very
Yeah,
much.
yeah, absolutely. Keep at it. Now is that now you said you went to college for theology. Is that how you hooked up with Professor Noctis?
More or less. We're a random two people that met on Twitter.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's the vast majority of all the networking that I do is through Twitter. Like Twitter is like my LinkedIn. If LinkedIn wasn't just advertisements and commercials
Right.
from people, you know.
Yeah, a
Um
lot less pussy in bio in
right,
LinkedIn.
yeah, so yeah. Stuff like that. It's a love-hate relationship with that app, but most of the networking, I mean, so like the website, like we're always looking for new writers and stuff, and we need that. Every team needs to kind of get that freshness in. And that's all, like 90% of that's come through Twitter. So it's a
Nice.
great platform to continue to meet people. And him and I just like ran into each other one day. So he was like, I want to say he was like brand new to the internet. Um, just starting out. It was great. And we just connected, and it's kind of like a kindred spirits type thing,
Well, he's on my short list for sure. I definitely want to talk to that guy.
Yeah, for sure.
I think he'd be a fascinating conversation. Wrote his
Definitely.
thesis on Final Fantasy 15. Is that right?
Yes,
That's cool
it
as fuck.
is, and I've seen it. It's Final Fantasy 15 and Hebraic kingship. So it's studied
That
stuff.
literally makes me want to play Final Fantasy 15. I can't give it any better praise than that. Because after Final
Yeah.
Fantasy 13, I was throwing the fucking talent in that goddamn series.
Yeah, his name's Wade. I always call him Wade, and he knows I'm not a huge fan of 15 still, but I have to give him credit that he makes people actually want to play it.
Yeah.
Um, by referencing like 3,000-year-old like genealogies and stuff like that. But whatever works, because yeah, I didn't enjoy that game either personally.
Yeah, I've not played it, so I can't speak on it yet.
Uh-huh.
But my only experience with 15 is watching Super Eye Patch Wolf's Final Fantasy 15 as a mediocre disappointment. So that's not
Mm,
exactly the best thing for gauging how you would like a game.
right, right,
He did
right.
make some interesting points. Like one of the things Eye Patch Wolf said is, you're a kingdom that is just invaded by monsters. Essentially, there's monsters everywhere on the roads, and yet these settlements have no walls to fend off these monsters, and it just kind of takes you out of the world, is what he was saying.
Mm,
Like it's like in a world with monsters wandering around, wouldn't these settlements have walls or something? Like think Dragon Quest
yeah,
11, there was walls in all those settlements because of the monsters
yeah.
roaming around.
And people have like flying cars and phones. It just seems like if you've got modern, it's part of it is the suspension of disbelief for sure. That like, yeah, you've got magic crystals that can do anything. Why don't they just solve the story? And the obvious answer is because then there wouldn't be a story.
Right?
But
It's like the Thanos snap. It's like, oh, you can snap your
exactly,
fingers and make
yeah,
more resources, right, homie?
yeah.
You don't have
But
to
I think part
genocide
of it
half the
is
fucking universe.
right. Part of it is execution. So that like uh we may be more willing perhaps to suspend our disbelief if the presentation is on point, but if it's not, then yeah, there are going to be issues.
Sure, sure. But yeah, definitely, definitely piqued my interest more than that was a game I had completely written off until I started looking at some of his stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, man. Like now I get it. I get it now.
Right, for sure. I
So
know he'd be happy to hear that.
all righty, taking a quick look here in the chat. Belmont says Infernax is a Zelda 2 and Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest hybrid game. That just moved up the list.
Yeah, I'd heard good things about Infernax.
Yeah. Mad Kaiser's here. What's going on, Kaiser? Hey, how you doing, buddy? Show collects is okay. I'm back. My fault. What's up again, everybody? LOL. Hey, what's going on, man? Thanks for coming back. Yeah. Belmont tells you got my attention, and he says, "Gotcha, man." So yeah, I think he's going to look for your DM. So if you have any questions on that, yeah, Belmont definitely a resource on with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've got a short list of creators that I kind of align with specific IPs. So there, he's definitely on there for Castlevania. Yeah, I know a couple people to reach out to.
And then Scorpio Seas Arcade is in. He says, "Jumping in late, but on my way home now. Hope hope all are well tonight. I'm doing okay. I'm struggling through some food poisoning, I think, but I'm doing okay. This is a liquored up and sober actually, but I think Mage is doing well, aren't you, Mage?
Yeah, I'm doing okay.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, usually I'm starting to get old, so like my bedtime is rapidly creeping up. So
Yeah, we're
I
getting
still
ready.
have my energy though. All that to
For
say.
sure, yeah. And actually,
I can
we're getting
still.
ready to wrap here. Last thing I like to do is always see if you have any questions for me, because I've
Ah.
been pegging you with questions all night. So you have any questions for me that come to mind? Anything you want to ask me?
Let me see. I'm gonna come up with a couple here. So first one, best and worst RPG.
Best and worst.
We mentioned Obitus earlier,
Yeah.
and but best and worst RPG.
So
In your view,
Obidus is the worst I've ever played. Okay.
it's pretty bad.
So I'm going to say Obidus is easy for that. In terms of best RPG, I can't give you a straight answer on one. I can give you a few games that come to mind. Okay.
Okay, give me
So
like a top three.
yeah, top three. Can it be a top four?
You're breaking my heart. No, just kidding. Top four is fine.
Okay. I'll give you two from each genre: the CRPG genre and the JRPG genre.
Okay, yeah,
So
I
in
can do that.
JRPGs, it's Final Fantasy 3 and Chrono Trigger.
Okay, and you mean 3.6, right?
Yeah, 3.6. Yep.
Got it. Got it. Yeah,
And
that's top
in
shelf.
yes, and in CRPGs, as much as I love Morrowind, and as much as Morrowind is my soul food comfort food game, if I'm looking at quality and impact, I've got to go with Ultima 7, The Black Gate, and
Okay.
Star Control 2.
Star Control, I'm not familiar with.
Oh,
Black Gate does have a port on Super Nintendo,
yes.
which I'm sure is not the same as the
It's
PC game, as we
nope,
started.
nope.
Yeah.
Ultima 6 on Super Nintendo is all right.
Which one is
Ultima,
that? False Prophet?
that's the False Prophet. It's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Ultima 7 is a butter and ham disaster.
Butter and Ham Disaster.
It's
I've never
terrible.
heard. Where in the world are you from?
Illinois.
Like Illinois? Okay. That
Yeah.
must be a colloquialism. I've never heard that phrase. I'm gonna start saying that.
It just works out.
Butter, butter
That's a
and ham
butter and ham
disaster.
disaster.
I'm gonna start saying that. That's a good one.
So yeah, I would say yeah, those are two. But my all-time favorite personally is the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind.
Okay.
From a quality standard, it's those other four.
Got it. So now let me think. I have a couple other questions here. What is the best worst selling game that you can think of? Because you talked about like macroeconomics and sales figures. What is a game that sold very poorly that you think is excellent?
Oh, think about this. Hmm.
That's a tough question.
Time Splitters Future Perfect.
Oh, what the? I gotta look that up. Time Splitters. Oh, I remember Time Splitters. Future Perfect.
That's
I
the
don't
sequel to
know.
Time Splitters 2.
Okay.
And I've recently discovered that on the Xbox. Caesar actually is the one who sent me a Xbox care package. And so I've been
Oh, cool.
gradually getting some Xbox games, and that game is fucking incredible. Great single player, great multiplayer. Um, you can literally be a monkey with a gun, literally. And
Oh yeah, there.
that is an amazingly fun game. Now, for you, not digging Goldeneye, I don't know how much you would like it,
Oh, for
but
sure. Yeah, I
but
see. It's a first person
that
shooter.
game bombed so hard that it killed the Time Splitter series, and it didn't deserve to.
Wow, it was the series killer.
Yep,
Okay, and
seems like it.
last question. What is a game and topic that you think I should cover on Game Logica? So,
Ooh,
the spread is I've been saying mythology, spirituality, and theology. I think that generally kind of covers everything that's really like belief oriented. You throw like history and philosophy in there though.
ooh. Earthbound would be interesting.
Oh my gosh.
Earthbound, and in particular, Mother
Yeah.
3 would be fascinating.
That series, you could just do like a year's worth of Gamelogica content on just that
Oh my
series.
God,
Those
there
are
is
so
so much.
culturally dense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Shigesaki Itoi was a reader, and you can tell.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, so like that is something that I don't think too many people have researched. And I don't know how much information there is out there. What books developers were reading when they conceptualized certain games is kind of fascinating. Like right now I'll make this short. Right now I was reading Dante's Comedy. And
Good
a lot of
stuff.
people talk about Final Fantasy 3-6 with the Kefka fight, right? Um kind of modeling
Literally going through.
Dante's
Yeah, you're literally going through Inferno to Purgatorio to Paradiso.
exactly, exactly.
100%.
Now, then that given the age of the game, Sakaguchi didn't just run over to like a Wikipedia page and find the basic structure of the book. Like he probably read the book. And so a question I was asking is how much more of that book is in that game? And
A
I don't
lot.
know.
A lot, actually.
Yeah, but that's what I'm trying to explore. Like I want to
Yeah,
see.
look at Celis's journey once she gets to the world of ruin. Just look at that whole
Oh
thing.
yeah. No, 100%. One theory that I wanted to test is like the characters in 6 are flawed in a lot of ways. And
Hmm.
so I wanted to see, can you place all of the playable characters in either Purgatorio or Inferno? And I think you can. I have like a list going. That'll be an eventual video.
Would fucking
I'll be
love to
reaching
see
out to
that.
a lot of people. But I don't know anybody's that's researched that before, so it's exciting. It's potentially new.
Yeah, and I
Um,
can't say I've researched it, but I've read Dante Alighieri, and
yeah. Yeah.
just playing the game, I'm like, oh yeah,
Yeah, there it
100%.
is. Boom.
Yeah, yeah. It's not research,
Yeah,
more a gut feeling for me, but yeah, it's absolutely there.
oh yeah, and it is an interesting concept. What developers might have been reading when they developed a game. So that kind of thing keeps me up at
It's
night.
also mythological in the aspect that in mythology, technology increases as you go further back in time. And so, for
Mm,
example, you have magic, which has vanished from the earth and is just now coming back through this magical technological revolution with magic tech.
yeah,
And so,
exactly. Yeah,
basically, they're unearthing the powers of ancient societies in order to advance, but because they were more advanced than what's currently here.
and that is a really big trope, I think, in Final Fantasy in general. Like even in
Yeah,
the
the
first
Final
one.
Fantasy is very mythological.
Yeah. Well, I
Um,
mean, like with the whole idea of like ancient advanced cultures, like
mhm,
the airship, right?
yes,
Is like usually like, oh, this is super ancient, but it winds up being like this amazing piece of technology.
uh huh.
Really fascinating concept for sure.
Oh yeah, no, it's amazing stuff. Yeah, so my Final Fantasy is one of my favorite series, and so I'm always looking for those kind of intellectual things that you can mine from it. That's like I said, that's why I got to check out 15 now eventually. But
Yep.
all righty, well, Bud, if there's nothing else, I'll go ahead and wrap up. Let you get to bed. Let me go crawl in bed and hopefully not die. And
Yes. Feel better,
oh,
please.
I should. I'm hoping by tomorrow I got to hide Easter eggs, man. I better be
Oh
by
yeah.
tomorrow.
Can't let
But
the kids down.
I guess I got one last question for you that I always like to ask of all my guests. So, Mage, did you have fun?
Yeah. No, it was great. I learned stuff. It was nice to interact with the chat. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
We'll definitely have to
And
have you for a round two.
yeah, I'd be delighted. It was a fun time. Great to chat about a variety of unexpected topics as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you never know what could end up coming up here on Liquored Up because you got the added bonus of the chat too. So, we kind of got our agenda, but chat, depending on can derail or fall right into that. So, all righty.
Sure.
Well, hey, thanks everybody for coming out. It's been one for the ages. I appreciate it, and Mage, I appreciate you coming on. Go ahead and shout out one last time where they can find you.
Sure. Thanks again for having me. And you can find me on Twitter at the Well Read Mage. Pretty much the Well Read Mage everywhere. I like to keep it simple, but website is thepixels.com, the-pixels.com. We do elemental video game critiquery there. And then a brand new channel here on YouTube, Game Logica at Game Logica YT, and that's Game Logica. And we're exploring mythology and theology in video games. It's been a lot of fun, but brand new channel. It's a month old. We need your support.
Yep, y'all know what to do. So definitely make it happen, captains. And I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna go ahead and wrap up then. So thank again everybody for coming out and love y'all. I'll see you soon. Get the fuck out of here.